What was the scariest we need to leave now gut feeling that you've ever experienced? Surfing a fairly secluded reef break offshore across a channel. This place is in a very southern state of Australia. Overcast weather, but a still amazing day for the waves. I was surfing with only one other guy. We were trading waves and getting to know each other in between sets. I asked what he did for a living, and he was a marine biologist. We'd both recently moved to the area, and were new to surfing it as well. Despite it being extremely good surf, after 40 mins he says, "I don't like this. Something feels off. I feel like I'm being watched, like I'm bait." I didn't want to leave as it was excellent surf, but this guy was a marine biologist, so I took his instinct as a sign to play it safe. We paddled back across the deep channel together as quickly as we could without panicking and walked the 15 men's trek back to the car park talking shit the whole way. I got his mobile number for future surfs together given how small town it is here and not knowing anyone. We noticed a 15 feet inflatable boat pull up near the reef and hang around for a bit without much thought. Later that night, while looking at my social media, I read about 3 fishermen at the same location we were at that morning, at the same time, in their boat, as they pulled up to check their cray pots on the beach side of the reef. They were circled twice by a great white shark that was as big as their boat. That guy most likely saved me from a horrible experience that day. I messaged him with the link to the Facebook page with the comments regarding their experience. Chills ran through my body for a good 20 mins. He was adamant he felt the presence of something, and he was right. Viewing to see a flat that didn't exist, not my story, but one my mum told me from her 20s when she was living and working in London, UK. I'll do my best to retell it. Also, I'm dyslexic, so apologies in advance for grammar. This story always gives me the creeps, though, when I think about it. So, back in her 20s, my mum was living in London and looking to move into a slightly bigger place. She'd found a really good price for a flat slightly out from the area she was hoping. She'd called the agent to book a viewing, and that's when things turned odd. So the guy booking the viewing started asking weird requests and questions, such as to bring her passport, her age, race, and physical appearance. Would she be coming on her own? Did she have a car, or would she be getting the bus? He, very persistent that she should arrive by bus as it would be easiest for her, explains it was a straight road down from the bus stop to the apartment block. Obviously quite unnerved by this call, but still interested because the flat looked ideal. She and my dad, who were dating at the time, decided to check the exterior and surrounding area. The day before the viewing, they drove there, first passing the bus stop he was indicating her to arrive via. From the bus stop, there was about 150-200 meters of derelict wasteland that she would have to walk past to get to the flat. And standing at the end of the street in the location this apartment block should have been was a huge abandoned building. Smashed broken windows, graffiti, no entry signs. The lot. Definitely nothing inhabitable in sight. Still, when she tells this today, you can see how much it, rightly, shook her. Of course, she didn't go to her viewing, however, she informed the police advising them of the planned time and place. From what she saw, from following up with them, they didn't appear to take this tip seriously, and little was done. A couple years later, though, while in a pub with some friends, she gets chatting to a guy she just met through mutual friends that night. He was in the police, and through conversation, her story came up. He said that area at the time of her viewing had a huge human trafficking problem. Still gives me chills. When I was about 8, in 1985, an old El Camino pulled up alongside my friend and I, with a man saying he knew my mom. He did know her name, but something felt off, so I grabbed my friend and ran. When we told my mom, she went white and called the cops. Turns out, this guy thought my mom had stolen his job at the steel mill she worked at the time and wanted to hurt her. He already had a warrant out for nearly killing his wife that morning. When I was 16, my mom had a terrible feeling about an outing some friends and I were going on. Hindsight being 20/20ths, it was a stupid move for me to go anyway, but I did. Long story short, there was a car accident, my 2 best friends died, and I nearly did. It'll be 30 years in November. I still regret getting in that car every day. My friends might still be alive if I hadn't. My mom had that mama spidey sense. She still does. More recently, I was at our other house in the country with my oldest son and his wife and kids. There was a break in the storms, and my son decided to go home instead of spending the night. I was filled with dread at the thought of them going home so late, since we were dealing with intermittent but severe storms. So much dread that I started crying and begging them not to leave. Thankfully, they agreed. We all started home the next morning with them following me and my husband. We came up on this stretch of road that we know has no lights at night to see police barricading a washed-out bridge and cranes retrieving cars. We all piled out of our cars to ask the officers what happened. Apparently, there were several cars that had kept going, not knowing the bridge was out. The lone survivor in the first car had told the police that they went off the bridge at about 9:30 p.m. That's about the time my son wanted to leave. My husband just looked at me, and my boy hugged me extra tight because he knew what could have happened. After graduating undergrad, I was working as a caseworker for individuals with developmental disabilities and got assigned a new case for a young man who had autism and severe behavioral concerns. I met him at his grandmother's house since she had custody of him since his parents weren't around. I think mom was in prison. Met this young man who was probably about 6'0" and weighing around 250 pounds, but had the developmental capacity of a 5-year-old child with a hairpin trigger temper. The house he was living in was absolutely destroyed, with the other piece of furniture that was not smashed up was an oversized beanbag chair in the living room. Grandma gave up trying to send the kid to school since he would absolutely destroy the place if he was forced to go. Grandma was no peach, but I felt for her and wanted to help. One of the meetings I was having with them, the kid and Grandma seemed especially tense, like pacing around the room and smacking the walls. After about an hour of trying to get stuff done and realizing that it was not going to happen on this trip, it happens in this line of work, I decided to call it since the kid was becoming more and more agitated. Grandma was annoyed I would have to come back again, but we scheduled for a week or so out and left my business card with a reminder of the appointment. I leave to go back to my home state for a few days. And when I get back, I get called into my supervisor's office. I guess the night I left, the kid had a complete breakdown and beat his grandmother to death. No one noticed until the kid came wandering outside after a day or two covered in blood. I probably missed everything by less than 3 hours. Years ago, before cell phones, I was driving home from dropping my husband at the train at 4:30 a.m. Only me and one other car on the road. He started turning where I turned twice so I didn't go home. I went to an all-night gas station and called the police. I gave them a description of his car. 3 weeks later, he was arrested. Turns out he was following women home and driving past their house and doubling back to rape them. No one had noticed his car. I'm glad I paid attention. Great awareness. My husband used to say I'm crazy that I do loops around our area if there's a car behind me when I turn off the main road to our little road. I tell him I'm not having some weirdo follow me home. He got followed by some crazy road rager once with our son in the car and had to pull a couple U-turns to lose him. He doesn't think I'm crazy anymore. People are. That's happened to me. I pulled out of a difficult junction where the roads dips down, so it's hard to see oncoming traffic when you're coming out. Didn't notice the white van coming up. I didn't even cut him off. It was just a bit too close. Anyway, he tailgated me all the way down the road like a lunatic. Absolutely unhinged for something that was a minor mistake. Luckily, I remembered there was a nearby police station, so practically swerved into this side street on 2 wheels where the station was and pulled into it. That got rid of him. He drove straight past haha. I've also driven past my house and doubled back if the same car has been behind me for a while and I'm driving at night. Better to be safe than sorry, and my gran once got followed home at night by suspected muggers because she worked in a shop. Me and my little sister went camping in the woods very close to our house when we were kids. We'd seen this bald guy with a blue shirt and a dog walking around, which isn't unusual for the area. You'll often see people walking and say hello. For some reason, though, I just got this tight feeling in my chest, and my sister must have too, because we both just gave each other this look. I don't know what it was that made me do it. This is very out of character for me, but I took a photo of the back of him as he was walking away. A while later, we see the same guy again near the lake. He comes over and asks about the tent we're carrying, where we'll be setting up, and are we camping with our dad? We say yes. We're just going to see him now. A lie. We must have had the same moment of psychicness, because we walked off up a fork in the path until we were out of view, then looked at each other and jumped down a path hidden by the bushes and waited behind them on the parallel trail for a bit. The guy watched us walk off, pretended to play with his dog until he couldn't see us, then turned around and ran up the path after us. Thankfully, he didn't see us hidden and carried on up straight where he thought we'd gone. We decided camping was a bad idea and went home. That evening, my mom shows us a post in the local residents group, which is a picture of the same bald guy trying to break into someone's house. Apparently, he'd just been walking around trying people's front doors and claimed to be a repair guy when he was stopped. I dread to fucking think what his intentions were, but it was very lucky me and my sister knew those woods so well. Otherwise, we wouldn't have thought to go down one of the hidden paths. When I was a kid, an adult patted my head and I developed an instant, inexplicable loathing for him and refused to be alone with him. My parents told me I was being ridiculous and forced me to be around him. He was later sent to prison for abuse of a girl. Similar thing happened to me. My mom's best friend got a new boyfriend and I immediately hated the guy. Mom asked what I thought of him. I said I thought he was Satan. I was 5 and learning how to read the picture Bible. So that was my only frame of reference to describe evil. Months after this, Mom gets a panicked call from her friend in the middle of the night. She'd come home from work to find the boyfriend passed out in the bathroom with a needle in his arm. When she tried rousing him, he strangled her unconscious. Shortly after this, he kidnapped her and her children at gunpoint and drove them across state lines. Sadly, it was the start of a long, abusive relationship. It's not funny in the context, but the mental image. So what do you think of Jackass Jimmy? He's Satan. From the mouths of babes. My brother and I were kids, playing hide and seek in the front yard of our house. My brother was 3 and I was 6. My brother was supposed to be counting and finding me, but he was taking forever. So I peeked around the side of the house to see what was taking so long. He had lost interest in the game and was standing near the front gate, which led to the street. As I'm looking, I see a brown car pull up with 2 men inside. The car wasn't familiar, and neither were the men. They both got out of the car and approached my brother. They started asking him questions and moving closer to him. I remember feeling panicked. I had learned about stranger danger in school and knew this wasn't right. I ran around the side of the house, flew through the back door, and screamed, "Someone is trying to kidnap Steve!" My dad didn't hesitate. He got up and flew through the front door. When the men saw my dad coming through the door, they bolted and peeled out. From that day forward, we weren't allowed to play in the front yard anymore. It's a really scary memory for me. Pretty sure you saved your brother, goodness me. Doesn't I need to go home now feeling count? And it wasn't me, but my mom. Anyway, I was around 12 or so, and my mom left to run an errand, leaving me alone. Very soon after she left, the doorbell rang. This was weird because we lived on a hill with only 2 neighbors. We all kept to ourselves, and we just didn't get random visitors. Thanks to some conveniently placed picture frames, I could see out the door without being seen. I look out and see a young man I don't recognize. He's dressed in a shirt and jeans, and something just feels off. So I ignore him and wait for him to leave. But he doesn't. He lingers and starts smoking. Again, this is an isolated hill. I'm alone, and now I'm getting scared. I go and hide and plan to wait for my mom. Except she just left, had a few errands to run, and I couldn't reach the phone without the guy seeing me. As I'm trying to figure out what to do, my mom comes home. She runs in and asks if I'm okay. Apparently she got this random go home now urge. She hadn't even run her first errand yet, but turned around immediately, found the guy in our yard and asked what he needed. I guess he muttered something about looking for someone or something to that effect, and my mom told him to leave. Apparently he was acting very strangely and made my mom nervous. To this day, I have no idea what he wanted and no idea how my mom knew to come home. But I am very grateful she did. I was at a family gathering, basically a reunion, but just for family within reasonable driving distance, probably 30 people altogether. It was at County Park on a small lake with some grills and buildings, just an empty hall with some picnic tables inside. You could rent for this kind of stuff. The sky started darkening as a storm was approaching. All the coolers, chairs, balls, and other kids' toys, etc. were brought into the building anticipating the rain. The plan was to wait it out since afternoon showers are common just about every day in the summer. Something in the air didn't feel or smell right, even though it appeared to be just a regular afternoon storm. Hair on my neck was standing up, and I was in full flight mode. Can't really describe it. The feeling in the pit of my stomach can only be described as absolute dread. I told my wife to take my daughter and get in the car. My brother-in-law took one look at my face and said, "What's wrong?" Apparently, I was white as a ghost. It wasn't even raining yet, and I was full on panic, yelling for everyone to leave. Something isn't right. No one else was that worried, mostly concerned with how I was acting. I went out to the car, and as soon as I was about to turn the key, the tornado sirens went off. We were not far from wherever they put those, or they are just stupidly loud, because it was deafeningly loud. Now the rest of the family is pouring out of the building to their cars, kids crying, and I look across the lake maybe a few miles in the distance and see a funnel cloud. Got the hell out of there, as did everyone else. The building we had rented for this family BBQ thing was completely annihilated. Literally just a slab of concrete and a shit ton of debris all around. It was hit dead on by an EF3. Wednesday midday run along a beautiful river pathway near my apartment block. About 1 kilometer in, I felt people watching me and directly turned around and ran home, even though I did not see anybody. Closed the 2 magnetic gates leading up to my door and didn't see anybody around or follow me. About 10 minutes later, 2 guys were at my front door trying to push it in. I was luckily on the other side of the door at that moment and pushed it back closed with all my force and began screaming. I managed to security lock the front door and text my apartment block for help. I was on the 2nd floor, and they obviously watched which apartment I went into. Looking back at the apartment's security cameras, they were able to see the 2 guys pull apart the magnetic security gates, 2 of them. The block then quickly changed the gates to a mechanic lock that cannot be pulled apart. I feel like there is some kind of undiscovered quantum-sized mechanism that allows us to feel when someone is looking at us. Like our body has its own double-slit mechanism that lets us know we are being watched. The theory is that our brain picks up on inputs that we don't consciously notice, but that it subconsciously processes based on known paradigms and communicates that information to our consciousness as a bad feeling. Things like the body language of a person, movement patterns, a bush or branch or rustle inconsistent with the wind, a shadow moving just out of sight, a smile that isn't quite right. Lots of little bits of information that correlate with prior negative experiences, which we aren't actively aware of, but that our brain cataloged. You'll actually notice it quite a bit if you spend a lot of time outdoors. Things like knowing it's going to rain soon will just pop into your head before you actively notice the signs of an incoming rainstorm. Or, if you spend a lot of time on the water, same thing, you start being able to read the water at a glance. Our brains are pretty incredible. I bartend, and years ago I kicked this guy out because he was acting very strange, muttering under his breath that he would kill my other customers. Just really hostile. He had missing fingers on one hand, and he was kind of a bigger guy. After bar close, I was almost finished counting money, so like an hour after everyone left, and I was just about to leave and I had that gut feeling. I looked out the window, and that guy was standing on the corner watching me in a ski mask. I know it was him because of the build. As soon as I grabbed my phone, he took off, but the cops know who he is. Now he has a vendetta out against me, and he's well known around town. He's fucking nuts. That sucks. Hope you were able to protect yourself. Wow, I'm glad you trusted your gut. My childhood friend's dad was murdered when we were kids in a similar situation. He managed a bar and had kicked out a young man earlier in the night for being underage. The guy left and ended up waiting outside for hours until everyone had left, and my friend's dad was closing up the bar. He was shot to death in the parking lot. It was so incredibly senseless. But I guess the guy was on kind of a murder spree and had also killed a few other random people over the span of a few weeks until he was caught. Thank you so much for watching. Have you ever had such a strong inner feeling that you just knew you had to leave immediately? Share your "we need to leave now" stories in the comments.